It was supposed to be another easy night. Jokes, laughter, applause. No one knew they were minutes away from watching a legend break on live television. The applause hit hard, bright, rehearsed, late night comfort at its finest. Morgan Freeman stepped out, smile steady under blinding lights. Jimmy Kimmel rose to greet him, charm polished, timing perfect. But something felt off. The crowd's claps faded too soon, replaced by a hush that didn't belong. Maybe it was the way Freeman's hands stayed buried in his pockets, or how his smile never quite reached his eyes. He took his seat, the chair squeaking softly beneath the weight of 86 years of legacy. The voice of God, the face of countless classics, the man who never lost his calm. Cameras zoomed in, the crowd leaned forward. Kimmel started light, the usual banter, aging gracefully, upcoming projects, Hollywood stories that had already made their rounds on social media. Freeman chuckled softly, that low, velvety laugh that once made entire theaters fall silent, but tonight it felt rehearsed. Then Kimmel leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing just slightly. The studio lights caught the faintest shift, and from showman to interrogator. "You know, Morgan," he began, his tone casual, too casual. "You've always been a man people trust, a voice that feels like truth itself." Freeman smiled faintly. "That's kind of you to say, Jimmy." "But," Kimmel continued, his fingers tapping the desk lightly, "that trust took a hit a few years back, didn't it?" The air changed. It was immediate, like someone had pulled the oxygen out of the room. The audience didn't laugh. The band didn't move. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Freeman's eyes shifted, slow, deliberate. "I'm sorry, what are you referring to?" Kimmel's voice didn't waver. "The allegations, 2018 CNN. A few women came forward, you remember." A single cough echoed from the audience. Sharp, nervous. The crowd shifted in their seats, unsure whether to gasp or smile. This wasn't in the promo clips. This wasn't supposed to happen. Freeman's face didn't move, but his jaw tightened just slightly. "We're here to talk about my work, Jimmy, not the things tabloids like to stir up." "It wasn't tabloids," Kimmel said quietly now. "It was CNN, multiple reports, a public apology that followed." Freeman leaned back, the silence stretching between them like glass about to crack. The lights seemed hotter now, unforgiving, showing every line in his face. His voice came low, even, controlled, the way it always had. "I said what needed to be said back then. I don't need to relive it for entertainment." Kimmel didn't break eye contact. "It's not entertainment, Morgan. It's accountability." The word landed like a slap. A few in the audience exhaled audibly. Someone whispered, "Oh, my God." Freeman looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, there was no trace of that calm storyteller tone, just quiet, simmering disbelief. "Accountability," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "You want to have this conversation live in front of these people?" Kimmel didn't answer. He just looked back, letting the silence do its work. It was the kind of silence that makes a man's reputation tremble. Freeman's gaze dropped to the floor for a brief moment. When he looked back up, his eyes were cold. "You're not my judge, Jimmy." "I'm not trying to be," Kimmel said softly, "but millions are watching. They remember. They're wondering if you'll ever talk about it." The crowd was frozen. Every laugh cue drowned by the tension in the air. Freeman's hand tightened around the armrest, veins showing. His next words came slower, steadier, the voice of a man holding the last edge of composure. "I've spent 60 years earning the right to be here, and you choose this. You think I owe you an explanation for something that's already been twisted 100 times over?" A long pause. Kimmel's voice lowered. "Maybe not me, but maybe them." He gestured toward the audience. And that was it. The crack. The first visible tremor in Freeman's control. His head turned, scanning the crowd, faces blinking under stage lights, half in awe, half in pity. You could almost see the thoughts forming. The weight of decades, of public love, of private humiliation. Then his voice, quieter now, broken around the edges. "You know, I came here to talk about hope, about the future, but you've decided to dig up ghosts." Kimmel shifted in his seat but said nothing. The damage was already done. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. A laugh track cue blinked off screen. Unused. Freeman's breath caught. "Let's move on," he said firmly. But Kimmel didn't, and that's when something in the crowd snapped. A murmur. A ripple of disbelief. Even the band leader looked uneasy, his hand hovering over the keyboard. The Legend of Calm was cracking live under white-hot lights, with the nation watching, and no one, not even Morgan Freeman, could control what would happen next. It should have ended there. A pivot, a joke, an easy commercial break. That's the late night rhythm. Touch a bruise, then pull back and sell a smile. But the room had already tilted, and you could feel the show sliding towards somewhere no cue card could follow. Freeman adjusted the hem of his jacket like a man resetting himself, but his fingers were stiff, measured. The people in the front row could see the tension in those hands. The camera's red tally light burned steady. No mercy in that little eye. "Let's move on." Kimmel didn't nod. He didn't reach for the mug or glance at the band. He stayed with the stare, the barely blinking stillness of someone who knew they'd crossed a line and believed there was a reason to stay past it. You remember the statement, don't you? You said if any woman felt uncomfortable, you apologized. A shift in the audience. Not a sound, but a collective intake, like a beach pulling back before a wave. The words weren't loud, they didn't need to be, they just hung there. A thread tied to something that couldn't be unwound on live television. "I remember what I said," came the answer. Flat as a sealed door. The tone of a man who knows that every syllable has weight. "I also remember what I didn't do. There's a difference. Where do you draw it?" Kimmel's voice stayed low, the careful cadence of a host who's used to keeping volatile moments just on the proper side of watchable. Lines, boundaries? Where do you say, "That wasn't me"? Freeman's eyes cut to the audience again, as if looking for a willing witness, a lifeline. Faces stared back. Too many, and not enough. A woman in the second row folded her arms, uneasy. A man near the aisle stared at the floor. This wasn't a sketch. This was a ledger opening. "I've already lived through the trial by headline," he said. "Slower now. I am not doing it again for your ratings." That word, ratings, gave the crowd something to grab. A nervous laugh sputtered up from somewhere, then died as quickly as it came. Kimmel didn't flinch. "This isn't for ratings, isn't it always?" The lines landed like quiet punches. The bandleader cleared his throat and pretended to rearrange sheet music that didn't need rearranging. On a monitor behind the desk, a producer's hand hovered over the break button, waiting for a sign that wouldn't come. "You're not on trial," Kimmel offered. "It sure feels like one." Another silence. Not the comfortable comedic kind, the kind that grows teeth. Kimmel tried to soften the edge, just a fraction. "People trust you, Morgan. They always have. People bring you into their living rooms because they think... because they want to believe you're human?" The interruption wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut the sentence in half. "They want to believe I'm perfect. I'm not. No one is. But I won't be turned into a symbol because it makes good TV." A murmur rolled across the crowd again. Not approval, not condemnation, just the sound of a room realizing it's witnessing a tectonic shift in real time. Kimmel leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "If you could go back, would you say anything different?" Freeman's answer didn't come right away. He set his hands on the armrests, pressed his palms down, and let the pressure ground him. "If I could go back, I'd speak sooner," he said finally. "I'd speak for myself before everyone else spoke for me, but I wouldn't confess to things I didn't do to tidy up a narrative for people who want an easy villain." The audience didn't clap. Clapping would have been a choice, and no one wanted to make one. Kimmel's eyes dipped to his notes, then away. A card slid under his fingers, a list of safe questions that were now radioactive. He let it go. "You understand that for some people watching, sorry felt like a beginning, not an end." Freeman's head tilted. "For some people watching, nothing I say will matter. That's not true for everyone. Maybe not." He allowed, the words barely above a breath. "But who gets to be heard here, Jimmy? The people with the microphone. And right now, that's you." A flicker. The gentlest tremor of guilt across Kimmel's face. It passed. He chose the next step anyway. "Can you talk about what you learned?" Freeman's jaw set. Learned, he repeated, and the word sounded like it was made of iron. I learned that once your name is a storm, the rain sticks to you even when the clouds move on. Somewhere in the rafters, a light buzzed. The kind of electrical hum you only notice when the human noise drops out. The room felt suddenly too bright, too exposed. Freeman rubbed at the bridge of his nose and let his hand fall. There was a time, he said, voice gravel soft, when a man could apologize for misunderstanding, and it meant he was trying to be better, not admitting to crimes. That time is gone. Kimmel shifted again, and this time his voice carried a thread of heat. For a lot of people, apology without change is just PR. What does change look like to you? Primetime penance, public self-flagellation so you can market ad space around it. The sentence hung there, barbed and quiet. A few heads in the crowd turned toward the cameras, as if blaming the machines themselves for what they had trapped. Kimmel's mouth opened, closed. That's not what this is? Then what is it? A beat. The desk between them felt suddenly small. Kimmel's reply arrived careful, as if each syllable had been pre-weighed. It's asking a man people admire to speak plainly to the people he's hurt. Freeman blinked just once. Even that blink felt like a decision. He let the words settle, then answered, immaculate and unhurried. I cannot speak for anyone's hurt but my own. I can listen. I can change what I do tomorrow, but I won't let you staple a stranger's pain to my chest because it makes a better story. A gasp, barely audible from the upper rows. And that was the turning edge. The moment where a conversation about responsibility became a clash over ownership of truth. On the control room screen, a producer mouthed the words "go to break." Another shook their head. Not yet. The director's hand hovered. The red light stayed on, implacable. Kimmel's gaze sharpened. So you won't say the words again? I said them once. I won't perform them. Perform? Kimmel murmured, like tasting the accusation. Is that what you think this is? I think the world is hungry for public shame, and you've set the table. A rumble in the audience, half shock, half something else. The guilty thrill of watching decorum burn. Freeman's voice lowered, almost tender with exhaustion. Let me talk about the film. Let me talk about work. Let me talk about something I can hold without it breaking. Kimmel didn't move. Please. The single word fell like a coin into a well, swallowed by the room. Kimmel glanced at the band, at the cameras, at the producer just off stage making a cutting motion across his throat. He looked back at Freeman and made the choice that would bring the night to the brink. We'll get to the film, he said softly, but first, one more question. The audience tightened into silence, a fist around the moment. Freeman inhaled, preparing. Ask it! Kimmel's voice didn't rise. Did you ever consider stepping away? Not because you're guilty, but because power needs humility. Freeman sat very still, and for the first time all night, there was nothing in his eyes but heat. You want humility? He asked, calm as a fuse. Watch closely. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the chair creaked like a warning. The studio felt suddenly smaller, like all the exits had been sealed. Somewhere, a laugh cue flickered and died without sound. The next choice would decide everything. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. Even the hum of the lights seemed to vanish. Then Morgan Freeman leaned forward, the quiet of the studio collapsing inward like a held breath about to burst. You want humility? He said again, low and controlled. You've mistaken humility for surrender. The words cut through the air, each syllable sharpened by decades of self-control unraveling in slow motion. Jimmy Kimmel blinked, caught between the professional instinct to steer the show and the human instinct to back down. But he didn't. He couldn't. Something about the silence, the attention, the weight of a nation watching, it made him hold the line. I don't think anyone's asking you to surrender, he said. Just to acknowledge. Freeman interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. I acknowledged it. I apologized for making anyone uncomfortable, for words, for gestures, things that were never meant to harm. But you people took that and built a narrative, a monster you could sell. The crowd twitched, a collective flinch at the sudden heat in his tone. Freeman's hands trembled slightly as he spoke, not from weakness, but from the unbearable effort of restraint. I've lived my life by the work, by the craft. Every film, every voiceover, every moment, I gave it everything. But one headline, one edit, and suddenly that's all gone, erased, replaced by a caricature. Kimmel stayed quiet. The camera zoomed in tighter, catching the faint sheen of sweat along Freeman's temple. You think that's humility? He asked again, voice cracking on the edge of fury. No, Jimmy, that's humiliation. The audience's reaction split down the middle. Some murmured, others froze entirely. It wasn't the tension of outrage anymore. It was the tension of witnessing something sacred crumble live, with no script to protect it. Kimmel tried to intervene softly. Morgan, no one's trying to erase you. People just... Freeman's hand shot up. Don't tell me what people want. You don't know. The pause that followed could have swallowed the whole set, then quieter. Do you know what happens when people you've worked with for 40 years stop returning calls? When studios that once begged you to narrate their stories won't even touch your name? You call it accountability. I call it exile. The crowd exhaled like one body, the gravity of his words sinking in. Kimmel's eyes softened, but his voice held. It's not exile, it's consequence. That word again, consequence. Freeman's stare hardened, a mix of pain and disbelief. You think I don't understand consequence? I've lived through more of it than you could imagine. I came from a world where one mistake could cost you everything, and I survived it all, but this... He gestured around at the cameras, the lights, the audience. This isn't justice, it's spectacle. A hush. A live audience frozen in moral limbo. Then, for the first time all night, Kimmel's composure slipped. His voice trembled just slightly. Maybe it's both. Freeman's eyes narrowed. Maybe you should decide which one you're playing for. A flicker of gasps from the seats, a few nervous chuckles, the kind that come when no one knows if they're supposed to laugh. Freeman stood up slightly, shifting in his chair. His body language changed, no longer cornered, but towering, reclaiming space. You brought me here to talk about my film, Jimmy. A story about redemption, about second chances, but instead, you've chosen to make me a villain again. Kimmel opened his mouth, but Freeman cut him off. Voice sharp now, almost thunderous. Do you think I don't know what this is? You want a moment, a viral clip, the great moral showdown, the sainted talk show host versus the fallen idol. It plays well in headlines, doesn't it? Morgan, that's not fair. No? Freeman said, his voice like gravel scraping against itself. What's not fair is pretending this is about the truth when all you want is the show. The crowd was dead silent now. No applause, no laughter, only breath. Kimmel's tone softened. You're right about one thing. This is a show, but it's also real, and people watching, they deserve to see the man, not the myth. Freeman's reply came almost as a whisper. Then maybe they should look somewhere else. And with that, he rose. The chair slid back, screeching. Lid. Across the stage floor like a knife drawn from a sheath. The audience gasped. Kimmel half stood in reflex. Morgan. But Freeman was already walking. Slow, deliberate steps. The lights caught the back of his suit as he moved toward the curtain, past the cameras, through the invisible line that separated control from collapse. Someone in the front row called his name. He didn't look back. Kimmel stood frozen, hands still on the desk. The studio felt cavernous, echoing with the sound of nothing. The band didn't play, the cue cards lay untouched. Then, applause. Hesitant, awkward, like people clapping because they didn't know what else to do. Kimmel stared after him, the realization washing over his face. The nation was watching a man unravel and another man hold the thread. And somewhere backstage, beyond the lights, the sound of Freeman's footsteps faded, replaced by the faint slam of a dressing room door. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kimmel muttered under his breath, not for the cameras, not for the show, but for himself. Jesus Christ, what did I just do? The director's voice cracked through his earpiece. We're live. Stay on him. Kimmel exhaled, forced a thin smile toward the crowd. We'll be right back. Cut to commercial. Only there was no cutting. Not really. Because even as the lights dimmed and the ads rolled, every person in that room knew the story wasn't over. Morgan Freeman wasn't done. Not yet. The hallway behind the stage was colder, quieter, the kind of silence that rings louder than applause. Morgan Freeman stood alone, hands braced on a dressing room counter, staring into the mirror. The reflection didn't blink. It just stared back, hollow-eyed, worn down by years of public grace turned private fatigue. From down the corridor came hurried footsteps. Kimmel's producer first, then Jimmy himself, breathless, caught between remorse and damage control. "Morgan," he said softly, "just come back, please." Freeman didn't move. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the lights above, the faint chatter from the studio beyond. Then finally, "You had your moment, Jimmy. Was it worth it?" Kimmel swallowed hard. "It wasn't supposed to go that way." Freeman turned, his voice calm again, almost whisper soft. "It always goes that way. When truth becomes entertainment, nobody wins." A beat of silence passed, long enough for both men to hear the distant audience murmuring, restless, waiting. Then Freeman straightened his jacket. "You want me to go back out there?" Kimmel nodded. "Just finish the show, say what you want to say. No questions, no ambushes." Freeman studied him, the faint tremor in his hands, the regret behind the eyes, and sighed. "All right." When he stepped back on stage, the crowd rose in cautious applause. Lights felt gentler now, the air less charged. Freeman sat. Kimmel kept his promise. They spoke quietly about the film, redemption, humanity, forgiveness. But every word trembled under the shadow of what had already been said. And yet, for a brief flicker of time, peace held. Two men sitting across from each other, exhausted, trying to patch the silence back into something human. But it wouldn't last. For a few fragile minutes, calm returned. The conversation moved gently. Craft, storytelling, legacy. Freeman spoke slowly, choosing words like a man handling glass. The crowd listened, careful not to break the spell, but the tension was still there, hiding in the pauses, breathing between syllables. Then Kimmel, maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt, said it. "It takes courage to face the past." The room froze again. Freeman's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here to face the past," he said. "I came to talk about what's next." Kimmel hesitated, realizing too late that the truce was gone. "I just meant—" "I know what you meant." The words landed with the weight of finality. Freeman rose once more, slower this time, calmer, but something in his face had changed. Resignation, freedom. "You don't get to define my redemption," he said quietly. "That's mine to live, not yours to narrate." He looked out at the audience, faces caught between admiration and unease, and gave the faintest nod. "Thank you for listening." Then he walked off. No anger, no grand exit, just a man reclaiming silence. The crowd didn't clap this time, they just watched him go. The legend, the myth, the man, disappearing behind the curtain for the last time. Kimmel sat frozen, eyes lowered, the hum of the cameras pressing against him like judgment. When he finally looked up, the words barely made it past his lips. "Sometimes," he said, "the hardest truth is the one we weren't ready to hear." The screen faded to black. Sometimes walking away isn't quitting. It's remembering who you were before the noise.